Yay! Welcome. Please take it away.
Thank you. Greetings from California. I'm very excited about the topic we're going to talk about, which is how do we present the Christian perspective in both love and truth. In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, Paul tells all of us that we are his ambassadors, that he wants to speak to the entire world through us. God has thoughts about things like what is love? How do you get to God? What is forgiveness? Is it possible? What's God's view on marriage, on family, on a bunch of different issues? And Paul tells us that he speaks through us. But this is an interesting time to represent the Christian perspective, right? People are moving away from traditional Christianity. We're slowly becoming the minority perspective on a lot of different issues today. And add to that, that we are in this communication climate that Deborah Tannen, who's a linguist from Georgetown University, she calls it the argument culture, that we approach everything as if it's a verbal slugfest. So how do we avoid getting into arguments, but rather get into great conversations about Christ, about God, about salvation with family members, co-workers, neighbors, and roommates? Is it even possible to do that, to talk about hard things, but do it in a way that provokes great dialogue instead of like uncivil debate? Well, I think the book of Proverbs gives us hope that this is really possible. Consider Proverbs 16, verse 7, that says this: "When a man's ways are pleasing to the Lord, he makes even his enemies live at peace with him." I love the realism of that verse. People are still going to be our enemies. They're still not going to agree with the Christian perspective, the teachings of Jesus. But the book of Proverbs says we still can live at peace with these individuals. Well, how can we do that? How can we have potentially difficult conversations, but do it in a way that actually can bring us together rather than pulling us apart? Well, as I read the book of Proverbs, I came up with a model, a communication model of how to structure a really difficult conversation. It's based on 4 different questions that you ask in sequence as you're talking to a person from a markedly different perspective. So here's the very first question that you would ask in virtually any conversation. The first question is this, from the book of Proverbs: what does this person believe about this particular issue? Proverbs 18:13 says, "He who gives an answer before he hears, it is folly and shame to that person." Isn't that interesting that the ancient writers of the book of Proverbs say that if you speak before listening, 1, it's folly, and 2, it's shameful? I think the folly part makes sense to us, right? I'm married to a woman named Noreen. I was on the debate team in college, Eastern Michigan University, and imagine being married to a person on the debate team. Sometimes Noreen will mention something, and I'll jump in and just give a rebuttal to what she says, and Noreen will say to me, "Tim, that's not even what I'm talking about." And my response is, "But if it was," right? That was a good response, right? I think we get the folly part. You have to understand what you're replying to. But notice that the ancient writer also says it is shameful to speak before you listen. Why is it shameful? Because you're belittling that person. The number one way to show love to a person is to show that person respect. So when I first listen to a person, I want to ask a ton of different questions about what they believe, about the worldview that he or she may have. I don't want to jump in at that point and co-opt the conversation. I don't want to point places where I think that person is wrong. I let that person speak and have time to develop his or her thoughts without me jumping in and challenging everything that that person says. See, that's the argument culture. The argument culture is as soon as you say something, I pull this Donald Trump moment where I just jump and attack. Right? We want to have time where we can actually listen to each other. So, very first question in all situations, I want to know what you believe about God. I want to know what you believe about Jesus. I want to know what you believe about salvation or politics or religion or anything like that. Now, once you listen to that person and you offer summary statements and ask good questions, we now move on to question number 2. And question number 2 is this: why do you believe what you believe? See, some of you might be thinking, wait a minute, that was question number 1, but no, it's a totally different question. Question number 1 is, what do you believe? Question number 2 is really important. How did you arrive at these beliefs? How did you arrive at your convictions? The Harvard Negotiation Project, one of the top group of mediators in the entire world says the single biggest mistake we make in communication is I only trade conclusions with you. I never share how I arrived at my particular conclusion. So we need to get the backstory. Nobody was born a Christian. Nobody was born a Democrat or Republican. We became these things through a bunch of different series of actions and beliefs and decisions that we kind of made along the way. And knowing how a person arrived at a particular conviction or opinion is incredibly important and can foster empathy and understanding. Let me give you a for instance. Steve Jobs is considered one of the greatest American innovators in the history of American enterprise, but he was really hard to work with. Some would say that he was impossible to work with, right? He was a perfectionist. Well, one man, Jeff Goodall, did a series of interviews with friends of Steve Jobs, and this is what he noted. He said maybe Steve Jobs' search for perfectionism was based on the fact that he was given up for adoption as a child, and maybe all of his crazy perfectionism was an attempt to show his birth parents that they were wrong to give him up for adoption. Now, how would that change your perspective of Steve Jobs? Right? He's still hard to work with, but maybe it would foster a little bit of empathy or sympathy towards him. And so we want to find out, how did you develop this particular conviction? I didn't grow up in a Christian home. We never went to church in the Muehlhoff household. I became a Christian through a bunch of series of events. I became a Christian through Michael Crane's Karate for Christ. Don't you love that? Jiu-jitsu for Jesus. I love that, right? So when I became a Christian, I had no background whatsoever. So I have a real heart for people who don't have backgrounds. So in question number 2, you want to ask questions like this. What life experiences have really impacted individuals? What key individuals have influenced the person you're speaking to, his or her perspective? If I were to ask you to write down right now the 4 most influential people in your life, these individuals have changed your thinking the most. I could learn a ton about you based on your 4 people. It'd be interesting. My parents wouldn't make my list. That's kind of interesting. C.S. Lewis would make my list, a Christian writer. So what individuals have shaped your thinking the most when it comes to this particular issue? My dissertation director when I was at UNC Chapel Hill was a Buddhist. And so the Dalai Lama really has shaped her thinking about everything: grace, love, karma, justice. So to know a little bit about the Dalai Lama is to know a lot about my dissertation director. So all of us have these key individuals and key experiences that really shape how you view things. Another example, I grew up in Detroit. My dad was a lifetime employee at General Motors, worked on the assembly line. So I remember one time when I was in college, Foot Locker had this great sale on basketball shoes. So as we're walking into Foot Locker, my friends walked right through a picket line. It was only 2 individuals holding up signs, but they were picketing Foot Locker for some reason. I stopped as if a force field was in front of me. And my friends turned and looked at me and said, "Come on, man, that's a great sale." And I said, "Listen, I can't cross the picket line." And they're like, "Why?" Because I remember the Muehlhoff household 3 times General Motors going on strike and us not having any food whatsoever. And we'd wake up in the morning on a Friday and there was enough food to get us through the week. And I remember my dad looking at me saying, "You do not cross another man's picket line." So listen, I don't know what I think about unions, right? But I know that for me to cross the picket line is based on a life experience of my father that is really hard for me to shake. We need to understand the history of people's beliefs. Okay, so question number 1, first, what does this person believe? Question number 2, why does this person believe? The book of Proverbs says that a person's thoughts are like deep waters, and our job is to draw them to the surface. That's question number 2. Now, question number 3. Pound for pound, I think question number 3 is what we ignore the most in the argument culture today. It is what I think Christian communicators are particularly poor at. And question number 3 is asking this question: where do we agree with each other? Right? In the argument culture, we just look at where we disagree with each other. But we want to find, as much as humanly possible, points of agreement between individuals. I love what the Proverbs 15:14 says: "A discerning heart seeks knowledge. So we want to find areas of overlap. And I think as Christians, we're not well suited to do this. We're not particularly adept at doing this. And I think we need to really try to find common ground with people. So I teach at Biola University in La Mirada, California. Biola stands for the Biblical Institute of Los Angeles. So on my students, I have them do this exercise. It's a great exercise. A guy named Michael Grant wrote a book that was sure to offend everybody. The book was called Ranking the 100 Most Influential People in Human History. Can you imagine doing that? So he has his list, 100 all the way down to number 1. I show my students his top 10 list, but I scramble the top 10 list. It has people like Sue Lin, the creator of paper. It has Gutenberg. It has Columbus. It has a lot of religious people. It has Confucius, Buddha, Jesus, Muhammad. St. Paul makes the top 10. And then you get like Sir Isaac Newton. Well, I have my students rank the top 10. It'd be interesting if you ranked the top 10, right? The top 3 are, in no particular order, Muhammad, Sir Isaac Newton, and Jesus. Now, when my Christian students, right, when they get to the top 3, of course they're going to rank it, I don't know, Muhammad 3rd, Sir Isaac Newton 2nd maybe, and then Jesus number 1. Of course, God's going to get the number 1 billing. Right? So then I show them what his top 3 are. 3rd, Jesus Christ. Now, you can imagine my students at a Christian university, they're like, that's ridiculous. How in the world did God get bronze? 2nd on the list, and again, my students are already a little bit itchy. Muhammad can't beat Jesus. Right? There's no way Muhammad's going to get number 1 billing. Well, number 2 is Sir Isaac Newton. Number 1 is Muhammad. At that point, my students are like, that's ridiculous, that's crazy, and I just let them go, right? And they're just talking. Then I say to them, hey, what are we missing right now? And finally, one of my students will say, I don't know the author's criteria. That's right. So what's his criteria? Very quickly, here's his criteria. Life is made up of religion and science. That's reflected in my top 10 list. 5 of the top 10 are religious figures. But listen, we wouldn't even be doing this podcast right now. We wouldn't have this conference if it weren't for science. So obviously, Sir Isaac Newton is like really important. So it's always going to be religion. It's always going to be science. My top 2, it won't be 2 religious people, and it won't be 2 science people. I'm going to absolutely split that up. So I love religion. Top 5 of my top 10 are religious people, but I think science is going to be 1 or 2. I'm going to put it 2. So that's Sir Isaac Newton. Number 1 is going to be Muhammad. Why would Muhammad beat out Jesus? Because Jesus says, by his own words, I'm just a religious figure. Muhammad was religious, he was a military leader, and he was a politician. He's more diverse. And one could argue that the Apostle Paul, who clocks in at number 5 on his list, takes away votes like American Idol from Jesus. Dead silence in my class. Dead silence. I said, where do you agree with him? Like, you might not like his top 10, you might not like his 100, but where do you agree with the author? And finally, one of my students said, I love his idea. I love the idea for the book, and I can see where he's coming from, and part of it even agrees with his criteria. So when you're talking to a person, you can always find points of disagreement. That's the argument culture. We want to find parts of agreement. So in one of my classes, students do something that when they're done doing it, they'll be part of 1% of American Christians who ever do this, and that is they read the Quran cover to cover in one of my common theory classes. When they finish doing that, they're part of 1% of Christians who ever read a book of another faith tradition. Now, they're fine reading it if we're going to attack it, if we're going to destroy the Quran. No. My first assignment is give me 20 places that the Quran agrees with the Bible. Now, there's 50. I'm just asking for 20. They're like, what? But we've got to find places where we agree with people. And I don't care what the issue is. Find areas of agreement. I don't care if it's transgendered bathrooms or a different political party. We've got to find areas that we agree with each other. Now, you might be thinking, okay, wait a minute. You said this was a 4-question model. We've just hit the first 3 questions, and I have yet to bring up the gospel. I have yet to bring up Jesus. I have yet to bring up my opinion about anything. Why are the first 3 so other-centered? It's because in communication theory we have this principle called the rule of reciprocation, which means, generally speaking, the way I treat you is how you're going to treat me. So if we started this conversation with me disagreeing with you like crazy, then you're going to disagree with me like crazy. If I start this conversation with sarcasm, you're going to hit me with sarcasm. If I don't seek to find any common ground with you, you will not seek to find common ground with me. So evoking the rule of reciprocation, which by the way has biblical precedent, Paul says in Galatians, you reap what you sow. We want to start this conversation by listening to a person, seeking to understand his or her history and finding common ground. When it gets to our perspective, hopefully they're going to reciprocate and treat us that way. Now we get to the fourth question. The fourth question is this. Based on everything that you just learned, how should you proceed? What should be the one thing you should say to this person? I love what the book of Proverbs says. In Proverbs 24, verses 3 to 4, this is what the ancient writer says. By wisdom a house is built, by understanding it is established, and by knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches. In Hebrew, those words are very interesting. Knowledge is general information. Understanding is the prioritization of that understanding, and wisdom is how to use all of that in real life situations. So when you're talking to a person and now it's your time to speak, what is the one thing you should say to this person? If this is a roommate you have and you never see eye to eye on religion, you never have productive conversations about God, the one thing you might say to that person is, hey, this was a great conversation. I would love to have more of these conversations. Maybe you want to voice God's love to this person, right? This person feels like I'm not loved by God. God doesn't care about me. So I might want to pick the one thing I'm going to say at the end of this conversation, and I might pick a topic goal, which is I want to affirm the fact that I care for you and God cares for you. Some of you, absolutely, that's the time to share the gospel. To say, listen, I understand just listening to you that there's confusion about religion. How in the world can you choose to be a Christian? Why not be a Buddhist, a Muslim, or a Hindu? Why be a Christian? I'd love to explain why I'm a Christian and even explain how to become a Christian. Now, we're just going to have to wait and see how the conversation has happened to know how far I'm supposed to go into the gospel. We don't want to be insensitive to people. So I love to ask this final question. With this person, at this time, under these circumstances, what's the one thing I should say? So let's break that down very quickly. With this person. So what's your history with this person? Do you have a good communication climate with this person, or is it just kind of strained? Then I'd be very careful how much of the gospel I go into. Second, at this time, is this just not a bad time, right? Lunch is about to end, dinner is about to end, you know you got to go to work in like a couple minutes, so to explain the gospel would just be rushed. And then I would just, with the leading of the Holy Spirit, I would say, you know, Lord, what should I say at this particular moment under these particular circumstances? But I really think in today's argument culture, as Christians, we need to come across differently. And Paul says that. Paul says, I want you to share the truth, absolutely, but do it in love. Peter says, when insulted, I do not want you to give an insult, I want you to give a blessing instead. In Greek, the word blessing, we get the American word eulogize from that word, is to speak well of a person. So our communication is to be distinctly different. It is a blending of truth and love towards these individuals. And we know that the Holy Spirit has been preparing this person's heart all along, and you're going to step into some really interesting conversations. But let's do a really good job to understand the background of the people that we're talking to. Let me end with a Longfellow quote. Longfellow said this, if we knew the secret history of our enemies, I suspect that it would produce love, compassion, and understanding. So we need to know the history of the people we're talking to. That takes time. We need to do neighbor love. That takes time. We need to discern whether the communication climate is good, whether it's in trouble, or whether it's a hostile communication climate. And over time, applying the book of Proverbs, I think we can have some great, productive conversations. So let me end with this illustration. My wife and I speak at marriage conferences. Let me show how this actually all works in a really productive way. So if you're married or you're going to get married, Biola just started a Center for Marriage and Relationships, so we talk about this stuff all the time. By the way, you want to check out a podcast we do called The Art of Relationships is a podcast we just started. But in it, we talk about this. Applying this model can really help with conflict. One of the top communication researchers in the country says that most of the conflict you have with a significant other is what he calls perpetual conflict. He says about 67% of all conflict is perpetual. It's going to happen over and over and over again, which is a bummer. So my wife and I'll be transparent. Here's one of the conflicts we have. We have 3 boys. What is proper dinner time behavior? Right? I mean, what's acceptable when you're having dinner at the dinner table? My wife wants to raise gentlemen. Right? Her thought is, what happens when the wolf children go to somebody else's house? I want to have fun. I want milk coming out of the nose. I want bodily noises. I want to have a blast. Now, you might be laughing at that, but man, how many times do you have dinner together as a family? This was really tense times because Noreen kind of feels like she's married to a frat boy, and I kind of feel like manners are the most important thing there is. So one night, this absolutely came to a head. Noreen was going out with some of her girlfriends. I was making dinner, which means I'm making eggs. That's it. That's all I know how to make is over easy eggs. So we're on the second round of eggs, and I have an over easy egg on a spatula, and I turn to my oldest son, Michael, and Michael holds up his plate. He says, "Dad, hit me." And I just think, I can do this. I play racquetball. I can absolutely do this. So I turn and I launch that egg just as my wife turns the corner. Not only did I miss Michael's plate, I hit the cupboard. Yolk went everywhere. And Noreen just gave me that look. It's a marital look. One day you'll know. And I just didn't know what to say. I panicked. I said, "Michael said to do it." That's it. That's all I had. So Noreen leaves. The kids are in bed. Noreen comes home, and we're kind of upset with each other, right? So we sit down, and for the first time, I say to my wife, I do question number 2. I say, "Hey, why is this so important to you, having manners?" And Noreen shares a story. She comes from a family of 6, where they all were sitting together in a restaurant, and an elderly couple came up and said to Mr. and Mrs. Lanahan, "We've been watching you the entire time. What a wonderful, well-mannered family." That has stayed in my wife's idea of what family should be, and now she's married to egg-tossing boy, right? So Noreen said to me, "Why is it so much fun? Why do you want to have so much fun at dinner?" And I shared with her that my dad, like I said before, worked at General Motors. He worked double shifts. My dad came home. He was tired. He didn't want any messing around at dinner. So our dinners were not particularly enjoyable, right? It was just like eat and go. Well, one day I have 2 older brothers. My middle brother, Ken, challenged me. He had bought a fake rubber hand. And he challenged me, "I want you to wear that fake rubber hand all dinner, and I'll pay you $5 if you can do it." I said, "Done." Now, unfortunately, I sit next to my dad at the dinner table. This hand is a rubber hand. There's a big bowl of potato salad. My dad says to me, "Pass the potato salad." I'm like, oh my goodness. So I grab it. This hand won't work. This is right. My brothers are at the end of the table just howling. I'm trying to lift. I can't. My dad's like, "Pass the potatoes." I'm like, I'm trying. I started to get emotional. He goes, "Why are you crying? Pass the potatoes." And I'm like, "Dad, because this is like a rubber hand." And he was like, "Okay." Kind of thing. You know what? It wasn't a silver bullet. But knowing my history of why I want to have fun at a dinner table, knowing Noreen's history of why she wants to have well-mannered kids, helped us. See, I think that's what Longfellow's trying to get at. If you knew the history of individuals, it would most likely produce compassion. And that's what we want to have. In the age of argument, the argument culture, we want to be compassionate speakers of truth who beautifully wed together truth, the content of the Bible, with love, the content and example of Jesus. Hey, it's been great to talk to you guys. If this is interesting to you, you can find it in a book called I Beg to Differ, and would love to interact with you if I ever get a chance to meet you guys. So hey, it's great. Thank you so much, and have a great summer. Back to Nicole.
Thank you, Dr. Muehlhoff. Really appreciate that. And I agree. If we only knew people's backgrounds, man, we would have so much more compassion for people. Most people are like icebergs. We usually don't show you majority of what's going on in our lives, and we don't want to, but you see the tip, and then we usually just judge people by the tip. So as believers, it is so important to lead out in understanding people and loving them. We love it when people take time for us. So let's do it and take time for other people and ask them where they come from and what's their background. Okay, thank you. That was awesome. Great information, and just a really great way to communicate with people about Jesus, about how to love people. That's awesome. We love it. Okay, so we have a few announcements. P.S. Don't forget to buy your t-shirt real quick, $15 by July the 1st. If you haven't registered for a Cruise Summer Connect, do it. You'll have an opportunity. That's what I did this week, and I got my t-shirt. Or you can go back and register. Also, Training Tuesday, June 26th, and it's going to be super awesome, how to share with your friends and family. And then now we have our Faith Step Friday. Okay, so this is the opportunity where y'all get to take a step of faith and really put into motion what we keep learning about. It's a little exciting and a little scary. We did a survey. Majority of you said about evangelizing and stepping out in faith. 63% said that they were anxious about it and nervous. So totally understandable. It can be very intimidating. But I want to show you something really cool. So one of the things we do for showing what is successful evangelism, it is basically just where we take the initiative in the power of the Holy Spirit, leaving the results to God. We do this in Crew High School all the time. All my people over here know how to do it. So maybe your friend or your mom, you want to talk to your mom. She gets done talking to your grandma, blah, blah, blah. She sits down at the kitchen table. She's reading a magazine, and then this is your opportunity to take the initiative in the power of the Holy Spirit. It's not on you, like Bob talked about last week. In the power of the Holy Spirit, leaving the results to God. It is not on our shoulders anymore. We just let it go. Our job, the Lord is just asking us to take that faith step. Someone did it in our lives. That's why I'm here. Someone in college did that for me, my roommate. Someone did it in your life, and now you get to be a part of that. So our Faith Step Challenge is this week. There are some questions, and Dr. Muehlhoff gave us some great steps, 4 steps, and that actually goes perfectly with this of like just asking questions, getting to know their background. And this is just a more of a direct route, but using everything that you just learned, because listening, getting the information is key. You always want to hear before you communicate because you don't know what they're going through. So the first question is asking someone, did you grow up with any kind of spiritual background? Most people enjoy talking and are pretty open to sharing. So just ask them, hey, you can be like, Mom, did you have a spiritual background growing up? What was it like with Grandma and Grandpa? What was it like having this? What was it like having that? And then there's a ton of follow-up questions you can do. A simple one is, how was that experience for you? And then after that, the last one, after they talk, and you want to listen, ask them more questions, super good, you don't want to cut them off. And then the last one would be to, if you could start, like Dr. Muehlhoff said, adjusting the situation, figuring out the temperature. Do you have more time, or is it like the end of a lunch period, or is your mom about to go watch a program? I don't know. So what you want to do, if you have the time, then the next question, or you can follow it up later, is if you could learn how to start a relationship with God, would you want to? And that one can be scary, but it's super fun to ask people, and they can tell you whatever. They may say maybe, and if they say yes, whoa, that's an open door. It's so exciting. Your hub group can tell you more how to follow up, the knowing God personally, connecting with God, la, 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 la. So ask them, and they will help you, and more training on Tuesday. Yeah, okay. So next we did a survey last week on taking steps of faith, and we have winners. So this is going to be your winners for this week. You are winning a Roger Hershey's book, The Finishers. Roger Hershey is super wonderful. I've heard him speak many times, and so this is a gem. Okay, so if I pronunciate your name wrong, it's okay because we have your information and we'll contact you. Okay, so the first one is Amy Dunham from Huntsville, Alabama. Number 2 is Kendra Durham from Michigan State. Then we have third is Kelsey Barmore from Lexington, Kentucky. It's so fun. Then we have Casey Crothers from Pennington, New Jersey. And then the last is CJ Mackey from St. Cloud, Minnesota. So yeah, those are all of our winners. And now we are going to go back to our hub groups and do our discussion questions. And you'll get to hear more about what it's like to engage in all this. Also, hey, follow us. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Hashtag Summer Connect 16, not 2016. It'll be great. So then again, thank you guys again for joining us in Dallas, Texas. And yeah, we appreciate you guys. Bye. Bye.